Kidneys are not like free floating. They're located a little bit higher in the abdominal cavity than you'd probably think, and they're retroperitoneal, kind of like the pancreas and the duodenum. The most superficial covering of the kidneys are called the renal fascia, and it contains both the kidney and the adrenal gland in it. Beneath the renal fascia is perinephric fat, and it's similar to the fat that's in the eyes. This fat is used for cushioning this very important organ. There is also a fibrous capsule, which is kind of like it's like a stocking-like covering that covers the kidney and the adrenal gland, and it separates their contents from everything else. There are collagen fibers coming from this deep covering, and they're extending through the perinephric fat and the renal fascia to attach the kidney to other tissues around it. These membranes are all attached here at what is called the renal hilum. And you can see here at the renal hilum that this is also where the renal artery, I'll just label it RA, the renal vein, and a ureter all pierce or puncture or enter the kidney. We can divide the kidney into the cortex and the medulla. However, the medulla is actually all of these medullary pyramids, or these triangular shapes that you see here, which are really pyramids in a 3D structure. Most people have about 7 medullary pyramids, but it's not unusual to have more or even as few as 5 of them. The cortex of the kidney is this portion that runs along the outside of the kidney. So it's this big portion here. But the cortex has these cortical columns that dip down in between the medullary pyramids. And these would technically be made of cortical tissue, which is a little bit different than the tissue in the medullary pyramids. The renal artery, the renal vein, and the ureter all pierce the kidney at the renal hilum. And this wide open space right in here is called the renal basin. Now, sometimes this can be called the renal pelvis. I don't like that. That gets confusing, right? Because pelvis makes you think of a bony structure. And sometimes students get confused by the use of the word pelvis. So I like this term renal basin. I didn't make it up. It's just an alternate term. In this area, in the renal basin, this is where urine collects before it weeps or before it descends into the ureter. The point of each medullary pyramid is something called a renal papilla. And this is where urine weeps from each of these drainage areas into an area that's called a minor calyx, which are these structures right here. And these minor calyces all drain into a major calyx, and then they all drain into the renal basin, which then can descend the ureter. Most of the pictures that we will use will be frontal sections of the kidney, such as the one on the right. This picture on the left, though, it's a transverse section of the kidney. This wide open area right in here is the renal basin. You can see some of the membranes collapsed on each other there. That's where the urine collects before it descends into the ureters. These other open spaces right here, these are all segmental arteries running into a segment of the kidney. This weird looking centralized area right here, one right here, and we have a much larger one right here. Those are actually the renal pyramids that represent the medulla of the kidney. And then, of course, this outer layer of the kidney here is all the cortex with some of the cortical columns that dip down in between. And actually, you can see some of the interlobar arteries in the cortical columns.